you free, and I will follow, but cannot bar free. Make a promise, please, that you will always be me. Let's not go to a no before he strikes the G.
Hey everybody, how's it going? So this is something a little different, something that I used to do a number of years ago, especially on YouTube, is little sort of development blog videos about Savage and what I was working on and what I was doing and what I was planning on adding into the game. I figured that now would be a good time to get back into it as I get closer to being finished. Also just sort of to light an fire under my ass to actually get across that ever-elusive finish line. So this will be posted on the usual Planet Tobor video sites. We're going to be live streaming it a little different on Twitch. There's going to be minimal chat interaction because I want to get through all of these updates and feature sets and stuff, talking about the latest build and what's going to be coming in the next build. So as an FYI, I'll be doing these every Friday at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. And there will be a new playable build to go along with it. So any new updates and stuff we'll also be talking about on this this new series called Let's Finish Savage. So let's hop right into it, shall we? So episode 1, cultural differences in the CY in a sec. So this is probably the biggest and juiciest playable build that I've put out for Savage, probably over the course of the entire development history of the game. This is a big one, mostly just because I've waited so long to post a news post between the last one and this one. The last live build, or the last updated build, was put out in February, so it's been a while. There's been a lot of changes, so let's get right down to it. So, features and new stuff. There's a whole bunch of stuff to cover. So I threw everything together in this handy dandy little bullet list. And let's kind of just go through them, and I'll stop and talk about some of the more relevant ones as we go. Added weather and region-specific dynamic background tile layers. That was a big one. So, for example, if you're in the Gosenian Highlands, or the hills, the foothills, the starting area, those are sections that have a full range of seasons. So with the seasonal system in the game, you can experience winter, fall, and I generally kind of squished the two spring and summer together. It's the green season. it's where you're not seeing any brown or orange leaves or snow. And now in certain areas, not all of them yet, but certain areas like the highlands and in the hills, you'll see backgrounds that reflect that. So if it's winter and it's snowing, you're going to see the usual background parallax layers that you'd normally see, but they'd be blanketed with snow now. And likewise for fall, you'd see a lot more sort of like orange and red splotches of like foliage and fallen leaves and stuff. So that's added a lot of sort of visual depth to the game. Added functionality to pressure plates. Yeah, pressure plates are in there now. You can now throw like props and blocks on them to trigger them and to keep them down. If you pick up a block, it'll come right back up and it'll reverse whatever mechanism that you activated before. Added new item sprite description for wall jump item. Yes, wall jumping is now in the game. You got to track it down though. You got to figure out where it's located. Added new shard themed props and assets. So by that I mean like old, very, very ancient, even more ancient than the current world that the player finds himself in. You can think of them as like almost like a precursor race that built these bizarre structures and things. Old god kind of stuff. Added exciting, horrible, and frustrating new hazards like beams and lasers. This also includes streams of lava and large bodies of lava too. There are the new beam attacks that certain enemies have. The tech that I used to create those also doubles as things like flowing lava, like little mini like waterfalls that of fire that can fall down on your head and cause an upsetting time. So Moving on, we've got a new slave garb armor set, and putting together the slave garb armor set, I've sort of optimized my workflow with building out armor sets. I use a paper doll kind of system, and I've kind of doubled down on that, especially with the new armor set. It was like I needed some specific things like anklets and little bracelets and a kiltish skirt kind of piece, but now like I have got a lot more stuff now that I can sort of copy and paste and change colors to and create new armor sets that way. New status ailments to go along with the frustrating and exciting new hazards. You can now drown. You can't swim around forever if you're completely submerged. You can contract things like burning, which will, you know, whether you're exposed to an open flame or some other sort of attack, you'll be set on fire. You have the ability to dodge roll through burning damage. Poison, you can get poison buildup and eventually just outright poison damage. Paralysis in the form of enemies either grabbing you or stinging you with something and it roots you in place. And curse is a kind of an interesting one. I was kind of flip-flopping around with like, should it be curse, should it be disease? I decided on curse because disease kind of sounds similar to poison, and curse just sort of fits the lore and the feel and the vibe and the fluff and the flow of the game. Curse, what curse does is it will gradually suck XP away from the player in little tiny increments, and it makes your physical resistances and your attacks less potent. So if you get curse is kind of rare, but if you get cursed, it can be kind of a bummer. And of course, there's new user interface elements and HUD stuff that displays what's wrong with you above the player's head, as well as new user interface elements. I've got new health bars in the game. New health bars. I do plan on adding an option to remove those if the player so chooses. The health bars were pretty cool to add because it makes the game feel like it makes you feel like a big boy game. Makes you feel kind of like a real game, and they're kind of satisfying too because they've got a little like sort of background bar behind the main red bar that kind of shows you how much damage you're doing to the enemy, and it gives it a nicer transition between an enemy's living state and its death state. New consumable curatives along with the new status ailments. We've got leeches, which cure poison, Krog needles, which can alleviate paralysis, balm, which gets rid of burning, and the god bone, which eventually will break a curse. Got several new NPCs in the game, along with new rooms and buildings, specifically in the Gusek border village. And this is a big one. All NPCs can now be attacked and or made hostile and killed. So Savage has always kind of, in my mind, been a game about consequences, and I wanted to, not just through dialogue choices and stuff, but like actual action. I wanted there to be active consequences at play. So maybe you kill somebody and somebody else gets mad, or somebody puts out a hit on you, and you get kind of hunted by this new NPC on the overworld map that you never would have seen otherwise. And then, of course, if you kill an NPC that's a vendor or something, you lose access to whatever it is they were selling. You might get some goodies off of them, but then you won't get this sort of endless trade supply of either curatives or crafting reagents. New NPC related items as well. So little quest things and items like the new innkeeper has a key to his room you can rent in the tavern, for example. A new lock and key system for background doors. So the doors and different sort of portals that you see in the background now can potentially be locked, just like the side doors can. And new user interface improvements too I've added to those things. Like if you attack a door that's locked, I don't think it was completely made clear to players watching people play and stuff that hitting a door, if you had the appropriate key, would unlock it, and they just kind of like smash their axe or their fist against the door over and over again, even though there's like a little lock animation on there. Now it's very clear. If you hit something that's locked, a little bit of text will pop up saying locked. It's locked. Same thing with the background doors. So that sort of lock and key system has been expanded a little bit. There's been a new shortcut within the Devil's Shade, and its overworld map region added as well. So very similar with how the Ash Sentry and other aspects of the world map too have behaved. In the Ash Sentry, there's a big wooden gate out in front of it, and it's shut, but if you manage to climb behind it and do some exploring, you can find a switch to open it up, and then bingo. On the overworld map, the gate is now open and there's no more collision data there anymore, so you can just pass through on the overworld map as well. So now another big one, access to Gosenian Highlands and all of its current locations. You didn't have that in the previous build. It was kind of in the game, a lot of it in an unfinished state, and there was also an obnoxious bug that spit you right back out on the other side of Devil's Shade. Devil's Shade is like kind of the choke point of the hills area, which is how you get over to the Highlands area. But now you can get through 100%. You can go explore Hell's Teeth, Highland Cliffs, and Kuchvek's Crossing. So, I didn't add this in the bulleted list because I forgot, because I'm a bonehead, but there's a new stat and a new sort of player sheet as well. The new stat that I've added is called Cunning. So you now have 3 primary stats: Might, Resolve, and Cunning. And so you can create 3 very specific styles of Barbarian, or have overlap as well. For example, if you want a heavy damage dealer with good dodging ability, like a two-hander, like a big two-handed guy who's quick on his feet, you would probably put points into Might and Cunning. Or if you wanted a real survivor type, you'd put in points into Resolve and Cunning. And of course, you could double down on any of them too. I'm planning on making them viable play styles as well. But now there's all these little substats, so you can see what's going on, what these primary stats are actually affecting in the game world, or in your character anyway. And then of course there's Favor, which governs luck primarily, but I plan on adding in curse resistance, which Favor is going to affect as well. So new stat, Cunning. It's not 100% working in the game yet, but at least you can actually see what's going on behind the scenes. So the next playable build, which will be next week on Friday, I'm hoping about putting a little bit more functionality into that, and it needs a lot of tuning. A lot of this needs a lot of tuning and balance passes and stuff. So here's some of the new NPCs going about their daily lives before we barge in and ruin everything. make things miserable. There we go. You can kill and attack and make hostile everybody. There's the poor bar wench down there. I knocked all the crap out of her tray. The tavern, the innkeeper is now pissed at me, as well as the patron with the big sword in there. And we managed to decapitate Thekra, the old woman, as well. You probably remember her from the mines. Okay, so along with all the new status ailments, here are some of the curatives at work, and also the new user interface that shows you exactly what's wrong with your player character. So this poor guy here is cursed. He's paralyzed by way of a web projectile that collided with him. He's poisoned and he's burning. So Godbone will remove curse. Krog Needle gets rid of paralysis. The leeches will suck the poisonous blood out of your body, and the Soothing Balm extinguishes the burning effect there. And it's worth noting too that weather, like if there's a downpour, weather will also get rid of burning too, gradually. But it'll go a lot quicker if you're just kind of standing around waiting for the burn timer to go away. So there's me using a Krog Needle to get rid of paralysis and break the webbing that I'm stuck in, and using a Godbone to try to break the curse. Also, you can dive into the water if you're burning. if you're on fire and you're hurting, you can dive into the water. There's the new air meter too, that if you let it go down for long enough, you will wind up drowning. As well as putting new consumables in the game that alleviate certain status ailments. There's a new system for consuming items that either heal you or buff you. Both. Before you could just kind of spam the sub button item and heal yourself up to full, or buff yourself too. You could just, wherever you were leaping through the air or whatever, you could just spam that button and gain health back. But now you actually have to stop and find a spot to use it that's safe. If you if you're eating the meat or drinking that potion right there, for example, and you take damage, you get hit, you'll drop whatever it is you're trying to consume, and you won't get the effect. But the item will drop, and you can go pick it up and take another attempt at it. So, dropped essence orbs. I don't believe this was in the previous build either, but it's either way, it's been expanded upon pretty substantially. There's now new animations for the orbs as well. So that blue orb to the left there on the screen is the new sprite that I'm using to communicate a matured essence orb. So the way it works in the game, there's a miasma that's leaking living essence out of a great wound that's rent in the earth, and the essence is sort of formless and sort of an element of chaos. It doesn't know what to do. It's a living essence. It's not directed anymore, and it needs sort of an area to inhabit or a thing to do. As you build up essence through killing enemies, you gain what are called essence orbs, and you use those to spend them on points, like on stats, like your might, resolve, and cunning, and favor if you want to boost your favor as well. As you die, you drop your essence orbs, and it can gradually mutate into what you see on the screen. Depending on certain ways that you died or how many times you've died, and if your favor is low, it can eventually turn into twisted essence, and it can spawn what's called a twisted self, which is a shadowy version of the main character that can do all the things the main character can do. Not yet, but that's what's planned, is being able to use all the shields that you've acquired, all the weapons and stuff. He'll spawn with a certain set of gear at random based on what you've acquired throughout the course of the game. But if he manages to kill you, if you kill him, you'll get your stuff back. but if he manages to murder you where you previously died, the plan is going forward to have him hunt you down on the world map and sort of spawn in these different locations and stuff, and through the randomized procedural generated encounters on the world map as well. So that's how the dropped essence sort of gets worse. Or better, depending on your point of view as well. Sometimes you want him to spawn so that you can get rare items that you wouldn't get anywhere else. As well as dying on the overworld map, if you drop your essence on the world map, the procedurally generated encounter is locked in, and you can go back to that little encounter that spawned where you died, and all the rooms will be the same and everything. So you can track down your dropped essence, or the twisted essence that turns into the twisted shadow self that we are bravely doing battle with at the moment. And eventually, there we go. You can see he's pretty slippery because he has access to all your dodge moves and your aerial abilities and stuff. Of course, he spawns naked right now without any weapons, but the plan is going forward to give him access to all of your equipment as well. So that does it for new features. There have been a number of improvements and changes to the game, including I rewrote the physics for pickups and items. So before, they were on a completely sort of different physics system from the main character and the enemies as well, which made them a little bit more unstable, especially on moving platforms and stuff. As a result, this gets them stuck a lot less frequency. I'm talking about like the pickups and the gear drops and everything. They were kind of wacky, and they'd bounce all over the place, and sometimes they'd have speed that wouldn't stop. This fixes a lot of that. Dropped items from inventory now drop in the direction the player is facing, so I made it a lot more deliberate. It was kind of confusing before. So if you're going through your inventory and you want to drop something in order to pick something else up, you know, sort of point yourself in the direction you want it to drop, and then you drop your thing, and then it will appear in the game world. Improved and fixed many rooms. So most of this was traversal problems, like different heights of things that didn't feel good, or that were potentially non-traversable unless you triggered a like a movement exploit or something, and fixed some pros placements and stuff, and generally gussied up some locations. Skull wound tokens. This is a big one. So your little wound tokens, your life bar, your heart meter, basically, has gotten a huge buff. Each skull is now worth 4 hit points, whereas before each skull was now worth 2 hit points. This makes things a little bit more granular for me, where I can I've got more wiggle room as far as balancing and tuning and tweaking, especially enemy stats and stuff. So the torches outside at certain times of day were also drawing a really ugly transparent square that was like flickering and stuff. So I completely rewrote and fixed the torchlight stuff. I changed the texture size pages from 1024 by 1024, or from 2048 by 2048 to 1024 by 1024. Everything runs much better as a result, including the overworld. The overworld has huge textures, and I've now cut those down to size, and I'm just kind of tiling a little bit more of them. But as a result, I definitely feel a performance increase, and I can see the frames per second when I'm in debug mode. Like the fake sort of projected frames per second were, you know, very low. They were at like, you know, like 100 frames per second or something, and I'm seeing jumps of up to like 1,000. So it's pretty substantial. And the game, speaking of performance improvements, the game is now compiled in the Yo-Yo compiler for Windows, also to get ready for the move to Game Maker Studio 2 as well. But in forcing myself to do this, it's made me optimize a ton of code that wasn't working with the compiler. The compiler in general is much, much faster. It makes the game about 1 million times better. Like, you can actually feel it too, even if you were running at 60 frames. Like, everything feels a little bit more immediate and snappy. What else? I fixed some AI behaviors with the Argeshi Brute, and he was kind of a template as well for other humanoid type enemies. So they are reaping the benefits of his AI tweaks. Carrying undead corpses, if able to return to life, will be dropped and do damage to the player once reanimated. Okay, so if you're carrying a skeleton or something, you killed a skeleton warrior or something. Some of those guys, if you don't decapitate them or shatter their skeletons, they have a chance of reanimating. And before, there was some problems with them coming back to life if you were carrying around their corpse. But now if they come back to life, you see the animation happen, and you can be like, oh shit! You like maybe either toss them or drop them or something before they fully reanimate. Change the color of the healing number pop-ups from green to gold. So if you're eating meat or healing yourself in some other fashion, the pop-ups and the sparklies that indicated that you were getting healed used to be green, but now, especially with poison being added to the game, that was potentially terrifying, and I've changed those to a soothing gold color. Bug fixes! Lots and lots of bug fixes, so get comfortable. Make yourself a sandwich, get something to drink. Hopefully you're sitting on a nice comfy chair. I fixed NPCs in the border village turning into headless corpses. That was a weird issue where certain NPCs, if they weren't supposed to be there, I'd load them into the room, but then it'd be like, okay, are you supposed to be in this location at this time of day? If not, destroy them and move on. Sometimes destroying them would cause them to behave like an enemy object, but they didn't have a set corpse sprite, so it would just create the first corpse sprite I ever put into the game, and it would be like headless, and it wouldn't animate, and it'd just be standing there, and it looked awkward. So I fixed that. Fixed items from gates, from crates, and other breakables getting stuck in the walls. Finally, this is a thing that has plagued the game for, well, years now. But here we are. I finally went back and fixed it. There's some occasional hiccup there, but like 99% of the time that is now fixed, and loot dropped from breaking open crates or any other props in the game functions a lot more stably. Fixed giving Galvex remains to Losec and the player freezing up. That was a weird quest issue where giving one of the mining prison characters an item locked the game up and crashed everything. Fixed Cal appearing in the middle of the screen in the mid-air from exiting. Yeah, okay, so the beginning of the burning village sequence, if you went left, you'd wind up in the middle of the air in the sky, like in the middle of the screen space. So I fixed that. Fetishes, when you dropped them from your inventory, if you picked them back up again, they'd keep giving you favor. So fetishes by default, if you find one out in the wild and it's, you know, drops off of an enemy or something and you pick it up, it gives you a favor point. You could exploit this by dropping the favor out of your inventory and farming favor that way. Fixed using fetishes, not removing favor. That too. That was bad. Fixed Cal not locking to breakable solid container objects when ledge grabbing onto them. Yeah, so some of the more dynamic solid objects in the game I've had issues with for a long, long time. This is movable blocks that you can pick up and throw and interact with. Climbing up on top of them, putting them up on moving platforms has always been an issue. I fixed a lot of that, and the hitbox as well. If you climb up into a little 32 by 32 sort of square-shaped area, you'd get your head stuck in the ceiling. Now the game checks if your head is in the ceiling. If it is, then it puts you into the duck state, and it gives you the appropriate hitbox for that. Kel's feet getting stuck in movable block when ledge climbing up onto the block. That's been an issue too, as I kind of talked about before. So lots of moving blocks and moving platform stuff has been ironed out. There's still a few problems, but I'm getting there. Fixed inventory screen matching a fade in or out. So yeah, when you pause the game, you can see, or when you pause the game and go to your inventory or the main menu or whatever, yeah, the game will take a screenshot of the background, and it will sort of image blend it a little bit. Before it was going kind of wild, and it was matching the fade in and out of when you went to a new area, which it shouldn't have been. Fix falling hazards landing on enemy corpses, crashing the game. That's been fixed. Fix a bug where the jailer in the intro prison cell scene is in a constant attack loop. Yeah, he'd just be whipping over and over and over again. Fix that as well. Fixed a bug with brown spider enemy jittering between animations during an attack. That's been fixed. There's a few other enemies that are doing that now that I've noticed that I have to go back and fix. Fixed a game crashing when viewing the level up screen when sub-slot 2 has a weapon equipped to it, and no weapon is equipped to sub-slot 1. Sub-slots have also been an obnoxious thorn in my side that I'm gradually ironing out as well. So if you noticed stuff like that, it's starting to get fixed. Fixed a bug where carrying a corpse and jumping up into a solid, like a ceiling, would cause the player to get stuck in the solid or slowly travel up through the solid, like sucking you into the solid ceiling or whatever that you jumped into if you were carrying a corpse. That's been fixed. Carrying corpses marked as undead, returning to life, crashing the game, causing the player to be like, hey, the thing that you were grabbing isn't here anymore. We don't know what to do, and the game would crash. That's fixed. Carrying corpses marked as undead, stopping their coming back to life animation when carried. They'd be frozen in place. That's been fixed, so they'll actually reanimate whether you're carrying them or not. Fixed game crashing when ledge climbing up into a push block, resulting from variable can move not being defined. So if you've seen that bug, the can move bug, that's been fixed as well. Fixed certain enemies when carried by a player and killed, crashing the game. More carrying stuff, like all this like picking up and carrying stuff. A lot of it's gotten beat out of the game. So if you ever ran into the star flail as well, if you tried to pick it up, it would crash the game. It would either crash the game depending on the nature of where it was dropped or where you found it. It could also create a completely different weapon called the Pochtsika. That's been fixed. The blacksmith and Gusek not caring if you return to him either naked or wearing slave garb has been fixed. If you go into his blacksmith shop, he's got a no shirt, no shoes, no service policy, and that includes wearing like the slave garb and stuff. What happened before is if you'd piss him off and you'd leave and you'd come back and you'd be in the same sort of attire or non-attire, he wouldn't care anymore. I fixed that. So, also, finally, for fixed bugs, we fixed the angry NPCs not deactivating their dialogue interaction objects. Their dialogue would hang around. There's also another bug that I have to track down too that we'll go over in a little bit, where making enemies hostile and killing them will also respawn their freaking their dialogue objects. So not all of that has been fixed, but some of it has. So on the horizon, what else are we up to? What are we going to do? So going into the next build for next week on Friday, and we'll talk about it again next Friday, to Vollenheim. So the snowy peaks and icy fields of Vollenheim, along with several dungeons and locations, like the Twin Fangs and the Throne Rot. These might not be in the new build, but that's what I'm working towards. That's what we're going to do. So that's sort of the more immediate roadmap of the game. The Twisted Self, the shadowy version of yourself, the sort of dynamic mini-boss fight, will hunt the player and have a little bit better AI. This next one is going to be a lot of filling out the missing weapons. So two-handed swords, two-handed axes, two-handed clubs and mauls, daggers and whips, they all need a little TLC. So I'm going to be filling out their ranks as well. A lot of bug fixes too. See, these are some of the bug fixes, especially over the last week. And at DreamHack 2 weekends ago that I went to, watching people play and getting feedback and everything, watching them break the game. This is some of the stuff that's come up. So there's a lot of NPC dialogue issues, like going and talking to an NPC and not triggering the right event trigger. Like maybe they should remember you, or maybe they shouldn't remember you, and you're talking to them for the first time, but you picked up an item that somehow mucked up the scripts into tricking the NPC into thinking they've met you before. Stuff like that needs to be fixed. Again, dialogue sticking around after NPCs go hostile and or are killed needs to be removed. Faster decrease in the orange background for enemy hit point bar. We were talking about that on a live stream a couple days ago too, about the feel of it, how it could be potentially confusing. Here's a big one. Here's a big one that I was watching the Great Gallus play. Well, I didn't see it happen, but he brought it to my attention. Thank God. This is a big one. Starting Savage in full screen breaks the user's display. Like it'll go black and then the screen will go white, and then you can't interact with anything in the game. So there's something weird going on, I think, with Windows 10 and Game Maker. And the way to bypass it is to right-click on Savage and go into Properties, and under oh man, what was it? In the video description, I'll put the entire thing down, because I'm trying to kind of drawing a blank on it right now. But if you disable like full screen window something in its properties, that will fix it. And that's under compatibility, I think. Like if running a program in compatibility mode, there's a full screen optimization checkbox in there, I think. And if you disable that, this fixes the bug. He was able to get it to he was able to recreate the bug using or playing other games made in Game Maker as well. So that's why we kind of think it might be a Windows 10 and a Game Maker issue. I don't know. Potentially too, this could fix it if I compile out using the Yo-Yo compiler, and eventually going into Game Maker Studio too. Like, who knows if that's fixed as well. But anyway, for now, be mindful of that. That's going in the news post as well. So armor overlays have a huge issue when you're powering up with either eating items like the Berserk Potion or the Fireweed. You go into this like sort of freeze frame where your character flashes, and it's like a getting stronger moment. The armor overlay is messed up, so I got to fix that. Using a consumable from within the menu bugs out the player, especially with the new consumables that force you to have to stand in place and either eat something or drink something. Whether that puts... So we talked a little bit about burning before, about how like a torrential downpour can put out fire. Snow also has this effect as well. But if you're indoors and the game knows that it's raining outside... You won't see the rain, obviously, because you're indoors. You're like in a dungeon or something. But it has an active effect on the fire, on the player's burning state. You can actually see the little sizzles, the steam coming off of the player as water is supposed to be putting him out. But you're indoors, and it's like, what the hell is going on? So I got to fix that. So, Kel fetishes that get stuck in solids, or the player fetish, I should say. Your resurrection tokens, basically. When you use a god fetish, and it pops open, and you lose favor, it can get stuck in a ceiling, for example. So I have to fix that. Daggers too, dagger platforms that you've tossed into for example, a gate that create little dagger platforms. If you go and you open the gate, for example, and it kind of creaks open. Any daggers that were stuck into the gate when it was vertical will stay in place. So I have to fix that. Same thing with blood. The blood particles will stick to that gets stuck to any dynamic objects in the game. If they are moved in any way, the blood sort of stays floating in midair. Certain rooms in the Cairns of Magdra stage or location are not tagged as outdoors when they should be, and therefore won't render the background like the sky and clouds and stuff, and we'll just have a black background. Here's one that might sound cool to keep in, but it's not very good. Crafting materials are not being removed during crafting. So if you build a new sword or shield or whatever, and it costs X amount of ore and wood, the ore and wood won't be removed from your crafting supplies. So that's something that we want to fix. So Q&A every week. be doing this. So for people that want to participate that maybe don't watch the live streams or whatever, you can go into the Discord. So Discord links will also be in video descriptions and in the news posts and everything like that. Go into Discord underneath Savage, the Savage group of channels. There's a Q&A section. You can post your questions in there, and that's where I will be reading from. But for now, I'm going to switch over to the chat that's been incredibly patient with me during this whole thing. Hey guys, how you doing? New build? Yeah. ORBS, this is a new build that came out a couple days ago that I'm going over now, and I'm working on rounding up a bunch of news posts for it and stuff. But yeah. If anybody else has any other questions, this is where we will go over them, or just anything. Like if you hate something or you got feedback or whatever, we can kind of talk about that stuff right over here. So yeah, you guys, thanks very much, and we'll do this again next week, 1 p.m. Central, along with the new playable build of the game. And yeah, that about does it for me. So at least for this, for Let's Finish Savage Shard of Gosen, Episode 1. We'll pick something to play us out. And again, make sure you join the Discords. Download the demo if you're curious, if you don't have access to it. And I'll see you next time. Have a good one.